Hello and welcome back to the ADHD Goals podcast. I have a super guest for you today. His name is Shawn Lemon, and Shawn is the founder of the Digital Organizer and has spent the last 17 years helping individuals and businesses get better at using their technology. A teacher at heart, Shawn believes the biggest reason that people struggle with their tech is because of a lack of understanding of the tools, which isn't surprising because they are constantly changing as technology advances. So welcome to the show, Shawn, and I hope you might be able to help us share your insights to help our ADHD listeners get a little bit organized. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Lawrence. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, fantastic. So usually we start the show. I mean, a lot of the guests that I have on the show will have ADHD themselves, but it's not a prerequisite. But would you want to share with us your experience of or relationship with ADHD?
Yeah. So it's funny that we're talking about this because last week I just was sitting down with my therapist and she's like, I am pretty sure you're a neurodivergent, my friend. And you just the way you think sounds so much like me. And my therapist has ADHD. And so we're going to take a look at getting an assessment, but it's just the constant flipping between things of one topic and another and trying to harness my thoughts and stay focused on one thing at a time and seeing it through to the end is quite a challenge. And I've had to develop a lot of ways to put up those blinders. And I learned the hard way after driving my team nuts, giving them whiplash
Mm.
from one topic to the next, how to do it better. But it's difficult in that it takes so much more energy
Mm.
to stay focused like that. So, and then, and sometimes it's just pairing it with someone else to help and to be able to keep track of things as well. So I've gone through quite a few situations over the years trying to figure out how to stay focused. And in the end, the majority of the people who sign up for discovery calls with us say that they have ADHD. So it's very much at the top of mind of how do we help you organize your space and set up your technology to work with how your brain works so
Mhm.
that everything is as easy as possible.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the way you described that reminded me of how I was in my previous career. Before I became an ADHD coach, I was a UX designer. I was a lead designer in a digital agency, and I found that organization was my weak spot, but it meant that I was obsessed with trying to figure out what the perfect process was for organizing projects. And, because I can only assume that it was an obsession that came out of sort of identifying a weakness and wanted to get better at it,
Right.
because of how I felt I was being perceived as by others. And so
Mhm.
that leads me on, I guess, to ask you, the next question is how did you get to where you are today? I mean, it sounds like, potentially if you do have ADHD and you find it a struggle to stay organized, that maybe there's an obsession there that led you to creating the digital organizer.
Yeah, it's where it was birthed out of for me is seeing people come into the Apple Store. I worked at the Apple Store for 7 years and I taught people how to use their tech. Right after they would buy a new machine, they could sign up for this program called One to One and have someone teach them how to use it.
Mhm.
So I just saw all these people who had huge messes and were paralyzed with the mess and couldn't get past it, couldn't learn. And that was just this stopping point that it really sucked all the joy out of it for them. And people needed help getting up to speed, getting that chaos under control so that they could take over and really learn and work with it at that point. And I had enough people in this situation that wanted to hire me outside of the Apple store because they weren't filling that need, that it finally got so big that I ended up leaving the Apple store and doing this, and that was almost 11 years ago now that, that we started this, and it was just, yeah, being paralyzed, and sometimes it was an obsession, and, some people, you know yeah, I wouldn't say it was all about ADHD or the attention, but just attention was just focused on a mess.
Yeah. I mean, when you describe those people that were coming in to see you at the Apple store and being in such a mess, I mean, what I find personally is that, our digital tools are really powerful
Yeah.
and they have so much potential for making our lives easier. But
Hmm.
with the more things that they can do, whenever you get a new phone or a new toy or whatever it is, it can do so much that learning how to get it to work for you and make your life easier is so overwhelming that, for someone with ADHD, that's probably literally where they'll stop is they'll be like, oh no, it's too much to learn.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I
A
suppose it's
lot of
about,
decisions to make.
oh, decisions. Yeah. Decision fatigue is a crucial thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have to decide what tool you're going to use.
Mm,
And then how much time are you going to dedicate to sitting down and moving all of it? And then you have to decide what should that folder structure look like and what should be deleted, what should be archived, and how does it archive? Do I put this or do I put all the things that I don't need anymore outside of this folder structure? Do I archive it right inside of that? And how do I name this file? And, all of that sort of thing, and then kind of circles back around, and then you get distracted, go do something else, and then next thing you know, you've got 5 different cloud apps, Asana, Todoist, ClickUp, Apple Notes, you've got it all, and everything's just kinda spread out all over the place, and it's a bit of a mess, and that's
y-
why
yeah.
my company exists.
Well,
It's a mess, and there's so much overlap. Like, how do you store it?
yeah. No, I mean, this could be a really fascinating conversation in terms of where you start, because I mean, I can't remember how many times, when working at an agency that we'd update our technology or where we were
Mhm.
storing things, and it gave us an opportunity to, rethink about how we organized our files, our
Right.
naming conventions,
Uh-huh.
and then it becomes, how do we get everybody to do the same thing?
Yeah.
And and then you might get one tool that is really good at doing one specific thing, but then you've got another tool that then has to talk to another tool. And it's like,
Mhm.
integrating all of those tools to not create more work is a challenge. So I guess my first question on, what you do is where do you start? So is it different if an individual is coming to you or a business is coming to you?
Mhm.
As to where you start, how do you figure out where is the best place to start for someone?
Normally, the first place that someone starts is email
Mhm.
because it's just this constant drain on energy and attention. And it's just kind of the thing that if we calm that down, then it gives us more space mentally and it gives us more time not having to process so much email or being bogged down by it. But then that gives us momentum to work on some of the other things. But that momentum and figuring out what is the thing that is causing the most anxiety or stress, that's typically the starting point. And so, in a discovery call when I'm talking with someone, it's really digging into what's the problem? How is that making you feel? How is that affecting you? What's the cost of this disorganization of some of the different places? So we can really figure out what's going to give us the most energy moving forward. And sometimes that's files, sometimes that's project management. It's very
Mhm.
rarely passwords, but those are kind of the 4 primary areas we do: email, files, passwords, project management.
I can't remember where I saw it. I think it was in one of the on your profile, but how does someone with 50K emails get their email down to 0? And I was thinking about my own inbox, and I just thought, what what is the largest inbox you've ever seen?
Yes. The largest inbox I've seen is 300,000.
Oh, okay.
And the largest account period was over 1,000,000, and that was
Wow.
12 years ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was well, I just threw out that number. It might have been 12 years ago. It was a long time ago, and I wouldn't be surprised if he accumulated another 1,000,000 before he left that company. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
crazy.
I'm just looking at my one of my email accounts, but my main one, and it's currently at 24,417.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So where would you start?
I would start with picking a cutoff date of
Okay.
when are we, like, what is actually attainable to go through and try and get on top of.
Mhm.
Typically, that's 30 days for most people, and we say, okay, let's find everything that's in the inbox. And so Gmail makes it really easy to make a search. And if you sign up for the resource, I've got like a whole file organization guide I'm going to give you. If
Yeah.
you want that, you can sign up for that on my website, and we'll put that in the show notes and talk about it at the end. But I've got a video that'll show you how to do it really easily on Gmail, how there's a special search that you can do to say, show me everything that's older than 30 days in the inbox.
Mhm.
And then at that point, we just archive it.
Yeah.
So we're not going to go through and delete. We're not going to sort and try and like move all those emails into folders and really comb through everything that's older than 30 days because the value versus the cost is just not worth it. And
Mhm.
the thing is, so many people can get bogged down trying to want to go through all that. And it's like, let me give you permission to let that go because you don't have to delete it. You can't search. You're not going to scroll through 28,417 emails to try and find what you're looking for. You're going to search. So
Mhm.
what's the point of having it in the inbox? Let's get it out of there.
Mhm.
And then let's go through those last 30 days and brutally unsubscribe from stuff that even though you think you like and you read, if you actually do not read every email you get from them or most of them, let's get rid of it. You can always sign up again later. Let's just
Mhm.
slow down the tide. And then from there, what's left? Emails from real people. And then let's talk about how do we actually handle email from real people when it's something that doesn't need to get done today and you have other more important things. Do you leave it in the inbox? Do you put it in a task management software? Do you write it down on paper? Like, how are you dealing with this so that we don't end up right back in the same spot before? And that's like the real magic of this process is figuring out how do we handle the different types of emails that we get
Yeah.
with different levels of urgency.
Yeah, because I think that's where I tend to fall into the trap. When I get motivated enough to organize that inbox that gets as large as it has, I'll tend to, just go through and then I'm basically signed up to loads of, whenever you download something from someone and then you just get all of their, automations and that just
Yeah.
builds up and builds up. And I suppose that would be my mistake is I'm going through and trying to decide what to unsubscribe for the whole inbox, trying to go
Mhm.
through rather than starting off with that, let's just get rid of the things that are older than 30 days and then just focus in on that last 30 days.
And then
Um,
from there, it's maintenance.
yeah,
Okay, I see another one that I missed.
yeah,
Okay, unsubscribe from it. Wait for that page to load so that you can see, oh, they put me on 13 different lists. And
yeah.
that link is only going to unsubscribe me from one of them. That's why
Mm,
most people are unsuccessful with unsubscribing.
mm.
But um,
I think as well, I use my inbox as like a cesspit for remembering things that I may need to remember. I'm not being selective about what I need to remember. So maybe I did download an ebook or something and I'll never know when I might need it again. So it's more of a case of, and this might come into file management later on, but taking it out of the email and putting it somewhere as a reference later on so that you can find it there rather than using your email as a,
that's the key.
yeah.
That's the key. We can't. So I don't think we should be filing emails unless you are like a real estate agent. You got transactions happening left and right. So if you're a busy agent closing 50 deals a year, that's a ridiculous amount of email that how are you ever going to remember all of the people involved in that deal? Well, you're not. So you create a folder for that specific client or that specific property that you're listing and then everything kind of goes in there and then you have a good archiving strategy for that for all of that communication, but any assets that are being sent via email, all that stuff needs to come out of email. Well, we're not really getting it out. We need to copy it and put it into our folder structure in a way that where we can find all of the things related to that and
Hmm.
ebooks and PDF downloads like I'm going to give you and stuff, you don't want to leave them in your inbox. You want to have a folder called operations. Inside of operations is a folder for resources. And that's where we put different types of, because this would be an operations resource, or it might be an IT resource, depending on like how big your folder structure is and how you think about things. But let's create a place for resources based around that topic so that we're not having to go to our email and search. Because how distracting is that?
Mm,
You go into email looking for something and then you find you've just wasted 20 minutes because you saw some deal from, your favorite retailer.
yeah.
We got to minimize distractions. It's just too much.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I think the biggest reason why I keep a lot of emails is A, because I'm downloading resources, which discussed about getting those out into a file structure. And then the other one is probably because I've signed up to use a tool. So I'm always like, at some
Mhm.
point, I might need to remember if I'm paying for this or how to log in if for whatever
Sure.
reason.
Yeah.
I'm imagining it's probably the same thing that we need to get that information out as well, probably.
Some of it. So I'll give you an example of my inbox. So I am going to switch VoIP. So I use Dialpad right now. I want to try out Open Phone. So I'm going to port my phone number and do the whole thing. And there's a lot of setup because I've got automations and you got to do your voice mails and your text messaging and like learning the system. And so they're sending me an email a day, onboarding, trying to get me to use this tool. And I signed up for it and then immediately got too busy and it's just not important to me. And so I was leaving these emails in my inbox, which normally I don't do, but I was like, I'm going to try and get to this. And then I just didn't. I just archived all the emails because all I need to do is search for open phone and there come all of those emails. So let's get them out of the inbox because if it stays for a couple of days and you don't address it, what's the problem? Like, why are you avoiding it? Do you not have time? And in this case for me, I didn't, but I will have time and I know how to find those emails again. So let's get them out of there.
Mhm,
If you don't know how you're going to find it again, that's where it needs to come out.
mhm.
That's where it needs to go in my marketing resources folder or operations resources or whatever, so that when I'm ready to browse, I'm browsing in the place where all of the marketing resources are.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not having to sift through a bunch of stuff. Like, let's stop pretending we're going to have more time or lying to ourselves that, oh, I'm going to get around and doing that. It's just, oh, man, get it out of there.
Mhm.
It's like, we've only got so much time to work on projects.
Yeah.
In the
And
end, we could probably find the resource again.
yeah, I wonder a problem I've had in the past, which I was thinking of ways around it, is how to manage work email and personal email. Because quite often we
Mhm.
might have like a separate personal email. And what would you recommend in those circumstances? Do you recommend keeping those separate? Or because I remember I'm thinking of a specific time where I was thinking, I want to have all my emails sort of in one space where I could just access, but maybe I
Mhm.
can just flick between, you know, tabs or inboxes. And that
Mhm.
I think that required a specific software to bring those all together. But what would you recommend in that circumstance?
Yeah, I've been through a whole journey on that, over the years of I used to be a big proponent of consolidating all the accounts together, like forwarding them all to one account so that you can
Mm,
process it all in one account and do that whole thing. And it worked for me until I wanted to hire an assistant and have them manage my email for me. And then I had to create private spaces. And then certain things would be left for me. And it's, what do I do about this? And so then it got kind of weird for that. And then I've found that I don't want to check work emails after hours, but I want to be able to see my personal email after hours as I'm, working on my budget or, my motorcycle and I'm working with a vendor who's giving me advice on some sort of adjustment that I'm making to my suspension or whatever. So I want to be able to look at that without seeing all of my other work stuff, and so I ended up detangling a lot of it. And I do like keeping a personal account and separate. And that's the beauty of an email app is you get to choose. what accounts you set up in that app.
Mm,
And we can have multiple apps too.
mhm,
So I can have the Spark app, which is what I use to check all my email, my work stuff, and communicate with my team. But I might just use Gmail for my own personal stuff. And that's what I do. So you don't have to add everything in that account. So I would say think about, what do you want your experience to be throughout the day? Like we talked for a brief second before the call, and you had mentioned just our lifestyle now. A lot of people are dopamine deficient
mhm.
because we're getting so many hits throughout the day. Like, we need to stop compulsive checking and having, we need to eliminate a lot of things that promote compulsive behavior. And so for me, that actually meant removing all social media, removing YouTube, removing email from my phone, because I found myself getting sucked back in as my brain just started to become more and more dependent on those hits of dopamine. I just had to stop it. And so I can check my personal email on my phone, but I can't check my work account.
Mhm.
So there's kind of a different level of connection. So what do you want your experience to look like? And that should really dictate, do I want to use one app or two? Do I want to consolidate everything together?
You mentioned the Spark app,
Hmm.
and I wasn't familiar. It didn't ring any bells, so I've just
Yeah.
quickly had a quick look at that. So, why do you like to use that? Is there anything significant about that that?
Yeah. So it's got this one feature that sets it apart from most email apps, and that's the ability to create a team. And when you invite people to your team, you can share emails with like a specific email, or you can share an entire inbox with other people, and you can have like text message type conversations about that email without exchanging emails. So this makes sure you don't accidentally reply to an email with a client with personal notes from your internal team. So,
Yes,
yeah,
that rings a bell.
and then keeping people updated. So while I do sales and I handle the most technical aspects, if that comes up in a client that we're working a project that we're working with, I've got other people who are doing the majority of the organization work. And so an email might come in and it's sent to me that I want Scotty, for example, to be able to see, and for me to just say, hey, just want you to be aware of this conversation that we're having. I'm going to extend an extra week for them because of this certain situation. And so he can just see it and be like, okay, great, got it, without having to forward it. So it just makes emailing so much cleaner. Plus, there's a lot of great stuff like being able to program when you snooze emails too.
Mhm,
So I want to say tonight means 4:30 for me, because that's
mhm,
when I'm typically looking at my email to wrap up the day and see if there's anything else that needs to be addressed. Send tomorrow means 9 a.m. tomorrow.
mhm,
Snooze later this week means Thursday morning, when I have time set aside to do that sort of task.
mhm.
So you get to program when emails get sent later, when you get follow-ups, if someone didn't respond, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's really customizable.
Yeah. No, I'm just having little cold sweats about remembering conversations that have happened inside like an email thread that have then gone back to the client. Like,
Yeah.
I can remember being asked to, cost out like a little project, and I'd go, well, I'm going to need to do this. So it'll be X, Y, Z, assuming then that they would, add whatever else on. And it just goes direct. And you're like, no. But yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whilst talking about emails, we've mentioned a lot about, taking things out of emails and moving those into
Mhm.
a filing system. And
Yeah.
so I'm interested to know whether you have one specific way to do it that you recommend, or whether or not you sort of recommend something, that works on an individual case basis. How
Like
how do how
for
do
a folder structure?
Yeah. So I mean, my understanding of that, if I'm barking up the right tree, I've come across GTD
Right.
and Para as like handy little ways of
Mm-hmm.
processing and organizing folder structures. I
Yeah.
mean, naming conventions obviously is connected, but slightly different topic to go into. But I wonder, yeah, how do you recommend organizing files and folders?
Yeah. So I like both of the systems that you mentioned, GTD and Para, and we pull from both of them. But I think that those systems really cater to nerds who are obsessed with organization and like maintenance and like routinely like working on this sort of thing and obsess over having any resource, well, especially Para, any resource that you have come across available to you. And while how he organizes resources, I've adopted that for our folder structure. I really encourage people to not save so much because we just have so much and so much is being created and the way we can find it is easier. Um, I think it's better to actually err on the side of not keeping as much unless
Yeah,
you know that this is absolute gold
yeah,
and you want it and you think you actually will come back and look
yeah.
at it later on down the road. But a good folder structure, I think, starts with thinking about the different areas of our lives. So for if I'm looking at my personal folder structure right now, I've got family, financials, health and fitness, just personal travel, and I've got an archive. So that's kind of the top level folder because I need to be able to access stuff regarding my family. So I'm married with one child. And so we've got a bunch of records. So that we need to keep birth certificates, social security, marriage certificates, all kinds of stuff like that that need to be referenced. I keep pictures of our driver's license and passports and stuff like that. So it's really easy to find. And so all of that's under family. And then financials, that's going to be broken up in different types of assets. So budget stuff, vehicle records, insurance documents, real estate, receipts, taxes. So those are some main areas. So what I want to do is organize a structure that makes sense for how I think. And I think taxes have to do with money. And so money, finances is my top level, and then taxes and underneath that. And at first, my taxes folder just had all of the documents in them. And then I had a lot of years of taxes. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was hard to find what I was looking for. So then I started organizing them by year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do now. And so that's the approach is use as few folders as possible and let it grow with time, just like we do in real life with folders. So how do we group them together to think about them? So that's one thing as far as like general resources that we have that we might need to reference later on down the road. But we also need to think about projects and how we actually accomplish creating something or doing our work and fulfilling the work. So if you're doing design and development, like you're doing that based on projects. So how are we grouping those things together? And I want to set up all of the things that I need for that project in that folder. I don't want to have
Mm-hmm.
to go and try and group like finances together. So project might have finance related materials, operational documents, things that we're creating, copywriting, images, all different kinds of assets like that. Those could be classified in a totally different way, but I don't want to have to go to 15 different folders when I'm working on a project. We need
Mm-hmm.
to have everything grouped together. So those are the two, like, if we're saying real basic types of folders would be project oriented. And we want to think about setting ourselves up a workshop where everything's at hand, or categorically where we're just referencing items like car records, taxes, and things like that, where, we get an asset, it needs to be saved in case we need to reference it later.
Mm-hmm. I'm just slightly aware of the fact that we threw out the GTD and para earlier without maybe specifying what they are to guests that listeners that perhaps aren't familiar. Are you able to just do very quick sound bites as to briefly explain the difference between those in relation to file organization?
Yeah. So GTD is, if you want to look into this, David Allen is the one who created it. And GTD stands for getting things done. And so he's got a method of storing files and processing your email and things like that, that make it so that you've got, well, a really good system to put things in. And it's usually kind of time based and when you're going to be able to handle these. And what's great about it is you can sort things based on, or you can get things out of your view. So this isn't for now, this is for later. And so then
Mhm.
you take it out of your current view, your inbox, and you put it in this other folder to be able to look at it later. But that means you have to go and you have to keep up with those folders.
Mm.
And so, whether it's an email folder or file folder, you've got to go in and you have to continuously process that. So you have to look at tomorrow, you have to look at those other things and then move them around. And for some people, that works for them of knowing, and then they will actually sit down and process those folders. I'm not one of those people,
Mm.
so I don't do it that way. I create time on my calendar to do certain types of activities, and I snooze things. I get them out of my view so that they will reappear at the right time.
Yeah.
Or if it's like a task as part of a larger project that I'm doing next week, that's not going to be snoozed. That will be referenced in my task management system or project management called Asana. And so there's a task, and then the context for that task is put in the project. So I actually get it out of view, and that is scheduled for a later time as well. So I don't want to have to process the same thing kind of multiple times and then go and move stuff around.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the getting things done, can work beautifully for some people, others not so much. I find more ADHD people have a hard time going back and processing things again.
Yeah.
It's just, get it out and get it out. And then once it's out of sight, it's truly out of mind. So
Yeah.
all you've done is you've just lost it
Yeah.
by putting it somewhere else. Para, I think, is interesting. So let's see if I remember the acronym. I think it's projects, areas of responsibility, resources, and archive. I hope I've got
Let
that
me
right.
just projects, areas, resources, and archive. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Mhm. So, really cool concept. I read it thoroughly. There's just this huge document. He's written books on it. He's got a thing called Building Your Second Brain. Really cool stuff. Doesn't work for me. Doesn't work for the majority of people who find me because they would have already self-implemented.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I did an experiment and redid my entire folder structure from this topic based in how I've always been doing it to his system. And it's like, this is cool, but I'm not using it. My brain doesn't think this
Mm.
way. But I learned a lot from it of realizing, we do have areas of responsibility where there's just recurring tasks, newsletters. A newsletter has to come out every week.
Hmm.
So that's an area where things kind of need constant attention, and it also needs a constant archive. And so he's got a great resource of archiving things in context of all of the different newsletters, and then a totally different archive, which I call it a deep archive. And that was one of my 6 primary folders for my main or my personal file structure. And that's old stuff that it is rare that I will
Hmm.
ever look for anything, but I just can't bear to delete it. And so that kind of gets out of there. So some really cool systems to check out and see what might work for you, experiment with them and then adapt. And what I do is, we've just taken an amalgamation of so many different systems and bring that to the table to find out how someone else thinks and what are their routines. And then we kind of apply it to
Mm.
them.
I I I didn't read his book specifically, but I watched a lot of YouTube videos on him explaining the Para method and
Hmm.
again this concept of building a second brain. And I wonder if we could talk about that for a moment. This My understanding of the second brain was in a way a blending of perhaps a typical or traditional file structure that you might have, let's say in Google Drive or something like
Mhm.
that, whatever you use. Um, and blending that with maybe sort of an area where you're taking notes. And also in the middle of that is, things, if they're put in folders, don't necessarily, they're not always where you expect them to be because they might be contextually linked to something else.
Mm.
And therefore, this building a second brain seemed to call for the need of a more thinking of, like, that electric thing that you put your hands on and it's got sparks going
Mhm.
everywhere, and
Okay.
it's linking off to everything. And just the power of being able to search for something by name rather
Mhm.
than necessarily closing everything off into files. But having said all that, so I started building a second brain. I used an app called Obsidian.
Mhm.
But again, that's introducing a different tool that's not my drive. So I still have my drive. And then
Mhm.
I've got this new tool that I'm taking notes, but then referencing everything as well. But I'm using this new sort of everything's linked contextually. And
Mhm.
I wonder what's your understanding of a second brain, and is it worth it? Are there any decent tools that you have found for creating one that, or is it just creating another tool to use that is adding more difficulty to everything?
That's a good question. Kind of hard to answer, but I'll
Sorry.
give it my best shot. I'm not an expert on his system, and I would say whatever software he's into at the moment, I would probably follow that. But I think in order for this not in order for someone to be successful with using a system like that, the most important thing is to complete it. Is to complete that transition and to fully embrace it. Otherwise, you fragment your data. And this is true for any new tool that you use. If you want to, I was just talking to another productivity expert a couple of days ago. He's been a writer for, Macworld and, you know, tester and sort of a software influencer, if you will, for a long time. And his stuff is just like, we're going to go through and reorganize a lot of stuff because, some stuff is in this app and some is in another and some is in the other. And that's what causes the chaos. So you want to fully commit and
Mm,
realize that, especially for building second brain, it's going to take a lot of time. My father-in-law is really into this. He's a productivity guru and leadership development guy. His name's Michael Hyatt. And he he spends so much time organizing, and he just loves it. That's his thing, and building out Notion or trying out Obsidian or the next note-taking app, and I don't like it
mhm,
personally because I just have so much that I wanna do, and I have so many different things that I could focus on because my company is small, so I wear a lot of hats. There's a
mhm,
lot going on, and despite there being some incredible resources out there and so many things that I could do and learn to level up, my email marketing or whatever, I don't have the time for it. I don't have the attention for it. And I'm finding I just want to get rid of so much less stuff. And when I am ready to tackle something and I decide this is the quarter that I'm going to level up my newsletter, and my email marketing, I'm going to go find all of that information and do a deep dive. And what was relevant 3 years ago may not actually be relevant today because there are trends and things that the way we speak to someone in market today is different than it was 2 years ago because society has changed. It's constantly evolving. So I really just don't want to keep all of these resources anymore and link a ton of different things. I want it to be as simple as possible. So when it's time to focus on something, I can laser in and just obsess, find what I need, get it done, and move on because so much stuff expires.
mhm,
I don't want to spend my time organizing resources. I want to spend my time taking action. And that is the thing that most people have a hard time doing is just taking action and getting things actually done.
mm.
So,
You mentioned earlier that you just happened to mention that you used Asana, and I
mhm.
assume that was for project planning.
Yep.
So, so again, I'm very conscious of. the amount of tools that we use, because the more tools we use, the more we've got to connect. So,
That's right.
so what do you think is enough tools for a business? So that's thinking about, everybody's going to have an
Mhm.
email,
Yep.
then we've got to have a filing system, and then we've got to work and communicate on projects. What do you think is, and then, I mean, I don't know if this is part of what you help people with, but then there's also, like when we're talking about email marketing and communication, and there's tools that we then need to use for that, but they can
Yep.
also connect with everything that we're doing. So what do you think is a good setup that is not too overwhelming in terms
Yeah.
of why would you justify having a project management app that's separate to email and filing and that sort of thing? If
Yeah.
you can. Right? Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
big question.
It is a big question, but I think I can tackle it. So
Cool.
the reason why the digital organizer focuses on 4 areas is because if you do those 4 things really well, then you don't need nearly as much. And then when you do actually need it, it's glaringly obvious that it's time. So,
So just to be clear, those four areas, is this, because I'm looking at your website
yeah,
now and you've got four areas: email organization and management, digital files organization and management, password management, and project and task management. Is that the four
that's
that
right.
you're,
Those are the
there
4
we go.
areas. So in passwords is the catch-all because it involves everything that we do, and it can be a major stopping point to productivity and can just bring things to a crashing halt, especially when you're working with a team and in the age of two-step verification. So we have to have good password management to just be able to take a lot of the friction out of day to day and still stay secure because it is extremely important. So that touches everything. But the 3 other areas are all feed into each other. We
Mm.
have communication, which is typically email at the core, but we can communicate a lot of different ways, but we'll focus on email for communication. And when we get emails, there's pieces of information that we need and correspondence that we need to make. And so that's appropriate for that spot. Sometimes we get delivered things and then they need to go into our filing system. And then sometimes we have things that are tasks that can't just be accomplished right away and are maybe part of a larger picture that we need to be able to store them so that our inbox doesn't get cluttered, so that we can continue to process email efficiently and be able to not have things fall through the cracks. Now, when you're working in project management, you also need to communicate about those projects, and you also are typically accessing or creating resources that need to go into your filing system. So, because there's overlap, we can store files in email, we can store files in files, in lots of different platforms. We can store them in project management, in our CRM. We can store files all over the place. We need to do these things really well and understand the where and why we're putting things in specific spots and ignore that we can store files in other locations and say, great, I know that I can upload a file into my project management, but I'm not going to because I don't want that file to live there. I need it to live in Google Drive where anyone can edit it and we're not having to deal with versions, version issues and stuff. So we need one source of truth primarily for the different types of things that we do. So, and then they grow from there. So, yeah, I think Google Workspace or Microsoft Office would be the 2 main platforms I would recommend for having your core apps. So, email, calendar, contacts, files. So, I want kind of all of that on your core system. And then you will probably need a task management or project management system. But we don't introduce that until you've got your inbox down.
Mm.
Yeah. So inbox management first, file management. And then as the tasks grow, email and calendar aren't enough. Things are too complex. That's where you add in a task manager or a project manager. And then you need to reassess how you work and fully commit to that system. And then you may find that just emailing people, your list of people that you want to communicate with is too big. Now it's time to add an email marketing CRM. And so that would be MailChimp or ConvertKit or something along those lines. So then you're adding that piece in. And I'm not going to send a personal email through MailChimp. That's for my newsletter when I'm writing
Mhm.
to my audience. And so then it becomes glaringly obvious for that. And then you might be managing your client projects and your process in Asana, but then if there's limitations and you really want to be able to track all of the emails and that are exchanged between all of these clients for the sales process. And there's so many sales conversations happening. You need to track it better. Now it's time for a sales CRM. So
Mm.
you build as you outgrow.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm currently working on building out a CRM. I'm using High Level, and
Okay.
I found, I mean, it's quite a huge tool. I mean, one
Yes.
of the reasons why I made the decision to go with it is because I'd gone through the phases of needing to do, social media automations and,
Hmm.
building email automations and the ability to, track a sales pipeline, opportunities. And then, that could quite easily be three separate tools. But then, with High Level, you can have it all
Hmm.
as one. I thought, okay,
Yeah.
if I can just spend most of my working day here rather
Hmm.
than transferring across. But then it comes back to the file issue that you say before, is where do you want to keep files? Obviously, because I
Hmm.
could, anything that I need to send to clients, I could then say, well, I could upload this file up to the CRM so it's ready to go from there. But
Hmm.
then you've got two versions of it from from where you keep it in Gmail if it gets updated by a team member or something like that. So yeah, sorry, I forgot where I was going with that. But yeah,
Was
I
it
mean,
where the interaction between files and the CRM and what goes where?
Yes, it was. I can't remember if there was going to be a question, but I suppose it was as you were talking about different tools. I was thinking, yeah, I was thinking about that. But, for me, the decision was like, I'm going to need all of these tools. And it's more cost efficient if I have this tool because it has them all.
Hmm.
Again, I mean, once you start working on that, we can hit overwhelm quite quickly because, as I was
Hmm.
saying right at the beginning of the show, is, there's so many things to do and set up that
Yeah.
it becomes a problem. And I suppose to sort of maybe tie this neatly into, the service that you offer for somebody with ADHD, we might be aware of all these systems and what is best practice, but fundamentally it, and unless and that was it, you said it, you complete the transfer to a new tool so that you can start
Hmm.
using it. And that can be the biggest problem is, we get halfway through,
Hmm.
a worthwhile switch to something new, but we can't quite get there. So I guess the accountability that you offer with your one-to-one service is, is invaluable. So is there anything you like to say about that one-to-one service that you offer?
Yeah, I would say if you're curious about it, just book a free discovery call to see, is this an issue that, what's been holding you back? Is it something that's really easily solved and you just need a point in the right direction or a word of advice or to say, no, there isn't an easier way to do that. You just got to get down to it and do it. Do you need help? No, I just need to be told I've got to do it. Okay, great. Or yes, like to complete this, you've got some technical hurdles that are going to be difficult for you to research and figure out and actually get to the finish line. And if you don't like doing this, you're probably not going to finish it. So that's where getting some help really can come in handy. So our thing is we don't do it for you because you're going to have to come right back. We've tried it before. It doesn't work. We want to do it with you so
Mm.
that it's your system. I don't want to give you a course for you to figure out how to adapt it to yourself because there's so many decisions you already have to make. So what we do is we've got this great framework in a very efficient process to take you from chaos to order And we're working with you hand in hand along the way to make sure that it's your system, built around the way that you think, with all of the knowledge that we have of these different systems and how to apply it. And that's really kind of the biggest value, is helping to make sure that you get to the finish line and it's something that you can keep up with, and you know how to adapt as life changes, as you outgrow tools, or as your business changes, or you change careers. Things need to be shifted around. And when you go through a process like this, then you know how to adapt it in the future. So we love working with people who, need some help and really value that coaching, and seeing that and are ready to make lasting
Mm.
change. That's what this is about.
Yeah, I suppose that's the essence of coaching. Really, is it's teaching someone to fish as opposed to saying, "Here's your solution, but you'll need to come back in 6 months because you won't know how to
Right.
adapt it."
Yeah.
So that's great. Well, like we said at the beginning, that we'll have a link to the resource in the show notes, and
Yeah.
a link to
Yeah.
booking a discovery call with
Yeah.
you.
Can I tell you about that?
Yeah, please.
So what I want to give you is our file organization guide.
Hmm.
So what I did is I pulled together a PDF of talking about kind of the concepts behind it, what the order should be, and I paired it with video resources that are part of. We have a paid resource library. It's kind of like a course, but it's more. It's just all kinds of answers to questions and things like that. But I took from this resource, and this is the core material that we take our coaching clients through in order to adapt this. So if you want to try and self-implement or see what you can adapt, this is a fantastic resource. You'll get a few emails from us kind of introducing you to the digital organizer. And I've got some videos in those emails of how to clean up your inbox as well. So this is just a great starting point. And then if you want to stay on for the newsletter, we send one out once a week. But that file organization guide is really great, and it's very easy to go through and to understand. So I think it'll be a phenomenal resource for you, and kind of introduce you to us. And if you want to have a conversation after that, great. Would love to talk to you if you need some help.
Fantastic.
So
Well,
you can get that at thedigitalorganizer.com/ADHD goals. And that's what we'll link.
lovely, perfect. Well, I think I can imagine there's be a rush if people wanted to come and check that out. I definitely will be having a look at that. But yeah, thank you for taking time out of your day to chat with us today. It's been really insightful.
Yeah, it's been a joy. Thank you for having me.
Well, there we have it. Thank you so much for listening this far. If you want to hear more episodes, then please subscribe on YouTube or whatever podcast platform you use. It really helps to spread the word. So if you know anyone this episode could help, then please share it with your friends. If you want to follow me on social media, I am on Instagram at ADHD_goals, and you can find me on Facebook too. If you want to get in touch with the show, then you can email me at hello@adhdgoals.co. And finally, if you're struggling to manage your ADHD and you would like me to be your coach, then please head over to my website and get in touch. Until next time, bye for now.